Okay, good afternoon. The time is 4:02 p.m. and I'm calling this meeting to order. This afternoon, we have present Directors Teitler, After, DeFreitas, Ramirez, and myself, meaning we have a quorum. Thank you to our interpreter. Would you please share the interpretation instructions with our participants? And then we can turn on the interpretation function. And Chief Landon, if you can, great. Okay, the first business in order is the approval of the agenda. Directors, are there any proposed changes to the agenda? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chief Landon, did you get all the votes?
Yes.
Great. Okay, the first business in order, or the next business in order, is a resolution on mill levy certification. And we'll start with a brief presentation from Chief Markham on that.
All right. Thank you, President Kuhlenberg. So today's business topic is a follow-up on December's presentation, and we will have a resolution before the board to certify the mill levies levied by the Roaring Fork School District across Garfield, Pickens, and Eagle counties. Today's presentation is substantially the same in form. I've updated numbers for final value and calculation outcomes. Share my screen. Jonathan, it says that participant screen sharing is disabled.
One second. The same thing is showing for the host. I apologize for that. I don't know if I can change an active meeting. I'll try to do that.
Does everyone have access to the presentation? Do all the board members have that on their devices? Well, let's start with the presentation and I'll walk through.
Yeah, and Chief Markham, just a note for the public that this is available and was sent out. It's available on the RFSD website so that if the public wants to follow along, they can access it there.
Okay. So as I mentioned, today's January 8th. We're going to go through mill levy certification for Roaring Fork School District. Moving on to slide 2, local property taxes pay for a lot of different services that we use day in and day out. In addition to school districts, fire districts, library districts, other districts levy local property taxes, and we enjoy the services they provide. Roaring Fork Schools itself collects significant local property tax. It'll be over $75 million for this certification, and that's 75% of our total district revenues. Going to slide 3, property values and mills. There's 2 components of property taxes. First, you have the property valuation piece, which comes from the counties. That's something that the district doesn't have any control over or say in. And then the mill rates, which is what today's meeting is about, is setting those mill rates for our district. A mill is equal to $1 paid per $1,000 of assessed value, or a rate of 0.001. It's important to note, assessed value differs from market value. So the assessor's office will determine the value of a home based on previous data, and then they apply an assessment rate against that. For this year, it's 6.7% is the assessment rate, and on that assessed value is what you're charged for taxes. Next slide, I believe it's slide 4, titled Property Values. Property values are reassessed every odd year. And as everyone here knows, local property values have skyrocketed across Colorado and our district in particular. It's an estimated 46% increase in property values in our district from the last assessment 2 years ago. The looming increase in local property taxes, that's a concern for all, and that was evidenced by significant valuation disputes for all 3 of the counties that we reside in. Slide 5, mill levies, fixed dollar versus fixed rate. The district has both. We have fixed dollar and fixed rate mill levies. Fixed dollar taxes, the mill will float down as values go up. So we collect the same fixed dollar amount year in and year out. As property values increase, we reduce that mill. If value properties decrease, as happened in the Great Recession about 15 years ago, the mill levy would increase, so ensure that we collect that same amount. Moving on to the next slide, mill levies. What does the district collect? The district has voter-approved mill levies for bond, principal, and interest. That skipped a slide. Sorry, I skipped a bullet point. Back on the previous slide, fixed dollar, fixed rate. Fixed rate mill levies are the opposite. So the mill levy stays the same, the rate stays the same, and as property values go up, the dollars collected go up as well. And so what does the district collect? The district has voter-approved levies for bond, principal, and interest, mill levy overrides, and our total program funding. Mill levies are set in accordance with ballot language in the state law. And again, we have a combination of fixed dollar and fixed rate. On to the next slide. The bond mill levy. The district has voter-approved general obligation debt. Bonds are used for capital projects and not for recurring expenses. Debt, principal, and interest is paid for by a property tax mill levy. And the amount owed each year, we've structured our debt so it's relatively stable year in and year out. It's increasing slightly this year. So that's a fixed dollar amount. So our levy would float down because property values have increased. The district has been proactive in refinancing voter-approved debt over the last 4 years. There's been 2 refinancings on substantially all of the outstanding debt, and that saves taxpayers $11 million over the life of that debt. On to the next slide, mill levies, bond mill levy. It shows an estimated year-over-year change. So you can see the net assessed value increased about 44%, which means the bond redemption mill levy went from 10.469 the previous year to 7.660 for the current year. So that's a 5.4% increase in the overall dollars collected. And again, we're collecting enough money to service our principal and interest payments for 2024. Next slide is titled Mill Levies, Mill Levy Override. Mill levy overrides or MLOs are taxes approved by a local vote. They're for recurring expenses above and beyond our total program funding. We use ours for salaries, benefits, for some tech, and other projects that we have in the district. There's been 4 separate votes. 3 from 1999, 2004, and 2011 are fixed dollar amounts. And the 2021 MLO is limited to increase only by inflation or by state law. State law caps the amount of MLOs you can raise locally to 25% of your total program funding. And so we are basically at that limit, so we can only grow by a small amount. The next slide will show the estimated year-over-year change for mill levy overrides. Again, you can see the amount collected goes up by 416,000 or about 2.5%. As our mill rate falls from 13.101 to 9.323. So again, the limits on what we can raise there are in place and the rate floats down. Okay, on to the next slide, total program mill levy. The total program mill levy, it's part of the School Finance Act funding formula. Each spring, the Colorado legislature passes a School Finance Act. They set $1 per pupil and an estimated pupil count for each district. There's 178 in the state, and your dollars per pupil times your pupil count gets you your total program funding. The next slide begins with total program funding has 3 funding sources. The first funding source is what we're talking about here today, local property tax mill levy. The second is another local tax, specific ownership taxes, which comes from car registrations. And the third is the state general fund backfills whatever is not raised by the first 2. The total program mill is set by law and can't be changed. As local property tax collected increases, the state backfill decreases. So, as we gain money locally, we lose money from a state source. On to the next slide, which will show the estimated year-over-year change for the total program mill levy. In this one, you really see the difference because this, again, is a fixed mill rate. And as property values go up, you see the amount collected increases by by over $15 million. Part of that is the mill rate actually increases per state law. We're in this era of mill levy equalization where each district is trying to get to 27 mills or be completely funded by local property taxes, whichever one is lower. So last year, our total rate was 23.759. It increases by 1 mil this year to 24.759. Again, that will raise $15.1 million, which is a 50% increase in local taxes. So on the next page, does that mean that's a windfall of $15 million for our district? No, as I discussed previously, the state equalization is going to fall by about 11 million. So you add those two together, our total program funding increases by 7%, just over 7% at about $4.3 million. And I mean, for a lot of last year and the years that we've been operating in, inflation has been 8% or more. So revenue is going up by 7, inflation is 8. It's about right there. I'm spot on with inflation. The next slide has 2 graphs. Local taxpayers bear a greater burden of total program funding compared to the prior year. So the prior year, the local funding was about 55%, and now it's closer to 76%. So again, as state share decreases, it's because the local share is going up. And finally, mill levy summary. Total estimated cost to a residential property owner. So last year, if their home was valued at $1 million and saw a 50% increase to 1.5 million, you can go through the calculation. We're estimating an $888 increase in their property taxes for the Roaring Fork School District, or 28%. So on a 50% increase in home value, you see a 28% increase in your property taxes. And in closing, we say it a lot and we mean it. The Roaring Fork Schools take seriously its obligation to spend, save, and manage taxpayer-provided resources. I mentioned before, when we've been in the driver's seat and can take action, we do, and that means refinancing our debt, saving taxpayers $11 million. The district is leveraging a taxpayer investment in 66 staff housing units from the 2016 bond, and we're building an additional 50 units without an additional tax on taxpayers. We received that question several times from taxpayers wanting to know when they voted for that, and the answer is they didn't, because they didn't need to. We're doing that through good management. And turn it back over to the board.
Thank you, Chief Markham. So this is an action item, and I went a little out of order since we had a presentation along with it. But at this point, I will see if there is a motion to approve the mill levy certification resolution from the board.
I would like to make a motion to approve the mill levy certification for 2024.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, so we will now go into discussion. Each board member will have 2 minutes, and then we will have 5 minutes of open discussion before calling for a vote. I'm just going to go around the pictures. So I will start with Director Tytler.
Thank you, Chief Markham, for your presentation. I do have one question for you. I know it's a question I've asked before, but just I think in this situation, it'd be good for the public to hear it again. Can you talk a little bit more, or can you talk again about what happens if the district decides not to fully meet the mills in the and what happens to our backfill from the state equalization if we decide to cut those mills?
Yes, good question, Director Tyler. And it's important to understand, you know, I said several times that the state backfills whatever's not raised locally. But if we aren't milling what we are obligated to by law, the state also reduces their backfill. So right now I showed that graph that's 75% local and 25% state. Whatever we lowered our mill by, they would lower their contribution by to make sure it stays 75-25. So they wouldn't come to the rescue with if we were to lower our mill rate.
So my understanding of that is even if we lowered the mill rate, we would lower it and then we would get fined. We wouldn't be getting that money that from the mills. And in addition, we would lose the same amount from the state.
Yes, a proportional amount from the state. That's correct.
I just think that's really important information for us to understand. And then 2 mills that we do have control over, being both the bond mill levy and the mill levy override, that we are taking steps to make sure that we're not boosting those amounts beyond inflation at that. And so I just think that's an important clarification to make sure that is understood. So thank you, Chief
Yep,
Mark.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Director Tytler. Director DeFreitas.
Thank you. My question was going to be similar to Kenny's, so I won't reiterate that, but just recognizing that school district is funded through a very complicated state level algorithm that is different from other special districts as well, who may be approaching this problem with different priorities and conversations around it, and just recognize that public school funding is such a complicated process, and that I am grateful to the hard work of the staff over the last few years to keep us in the financial situation that we are. Taking advantage of interest rates to refinance is not an easy undertaking. And so I just want to acknowledge that that effort has been put in to steward taxpayer resources as best we can and make sure that we remember that these choices are intended to support our student outcomes and our teacher retention and all of these important issues that the community has voiced to us over the past decade and repeatedly showed their support for us financially by passing those bonds and those mill levy overrides, which we are also very grateful for, and has allowed us to move through what was a very challenging economic time over the last few years, face this inflation rate increase with the best possible foundation that we can. And so, yeah, that was my comment.
Thank you, Director DeFreitas. Director Ramirez.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Markham. I appreciate so much the hard work from our team in making sure that we have the most clear and up-to-date data on how we need to make the most not just correct decision for our district, but I think really safe decision so that we can make sure the vitality of our district, because we know that times are changing. So I appreciate so much your time. I think my only question to sort of help this conversation on where we as a board, and I think where we as a school district have come to this conversation on the resolution, I'm really interested to know from you how do you think if we didn't pass this resolution that it would impact our schools specifically? And I know that we can say funding, that, they would get less, but I think it's really important to really stress, especially with the diversity of our schools, to know how you think it would really impact each school and the schools within our district.
I mean, we're talking about 75% of our revenue. So basically school would cease to exist as we know it by the end of the school year. We would default on our debt and become probably unborrowable, right? I just think it's, you know, it's not, to me, it's not a really viable option.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the hard work that went into this. And I'll pass it off to the next board member. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director After.
Thanks. Can you hear me? Okay, great. I'm having some audio issues. Thanks, Chief Markham, for the succinct presentation. In terms of what you just said in response to Director Ramirez's question, can you just clarify what you mean that schools would cease to exist? Because when you're looking at the math, it looks like if we vote to maintain, and if we vote for the resolution, then we will have an additional $4.3 million in the budget. Sorry?
You broke up a little bit there. I think I got you though.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure I understood that if we vote for the resolution, it looks like we've got an extra $4 million in the budget. But if we vote against the resolution, then school ceases to exist. So those seem like big dichotomies. So can you just clarify that point?
Yeah, if you don't pass a resolution, it's not like we mill what we were, we mill nothing. You have to certify these every year. So basically, we wouldn't collect any local property tax.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Where does the $4.3 million go? Does it go into the general fund?
Yeah, so for the total program funding, that's general fund dollars. That supports teacher raises, teacher compensation across the district, increases in utility rates, those sorts of things.
And then my last question is, actually, I have two other questions. One is, what does the, sorry, is that better?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. I'll keep it brief. I have heard that there might be some efforts in our region to have some taxpayer relief. And so I don't know if you know of any of those and are prepared to speak to any of those, but maybe it's just I'm wanting to get on the record that there might be some efforts around taxpayer relief that we as a district should look into.
It's kind of been district by district. And so while there was a state level solution passed, it was very minimal. But it's been, you know, I think special taxing districts with fixed mills that can just reduce that mill for a year are able to do that. Others that are more complex, such as ours, aren't as able to do that. It's also worth noting some districts that have a fixed mill are not going to adjust and are going to pass and receive a large increase in revenue.
Okay, thanks again for all the work on this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Start by echoing the thanks, Chief Markham. As always, I feel like we were front loaded with this. We've been talking about this for months, and I feel like I have a very thorough understanding of what we're looking at here. So I appreciate that. I think what Director After was speaking to were some county specific tax relief programs or rebate programs that may be coming out. Because she had mentioned that to me as well. So curious if you knew anything about that.
I do not. I reached out to several neighboring school districts to see if they are planning on doing anything. And they weren't planning on anything specific to this year. I think one neighboring district has a long-standing senior rebate program, and I'm not quite sure how that works. But that's all I know on those.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any additional questions. Like I said, I feel like we've had ample time to get into this, and I feel like we have a pretty solid understanding, and we've spent a significant amount of time as a board discussing this with one another, with you, and with constituents. So I appreciate that. So we will move into 5 minutes of open discussion amongst the board. So if anybody has anything additional to add or questions to ask, please chime in.
I would like to chime in. I do want to stress also that this is I think that for us as a rural Colorado school district, this situation really put us in a position where we had to choose really to dig in to making sure that we as a school district are elevating the issues of rural schools and the rural community when it comes to how we fund education. And so I think it's going to be really important for us moving forward as a school board. And I know it was the sentiment at CASB that we felt that we were put in a very just in a very unproductive situation where it just it cornered us. And I really think that we as a board in conversations have shared that, you know, we want to make sure that we do a better job at reaching our legislators and do a better job at advocating at the state level, that I'm really joining the concerns of rural school districts in rural Colorado, that when things like this happen, it really hurts us, you know, 10 times more because we really depend on this money to help sustain our schools. So I really appreciate, again, I just want to reiterate that, you know, even with the questions that Director Kuhlenberg and Director After just shared about some tax credits or how to help, like I know our school district has always made a concerted effort to try to provide tax relief or to try to find options to help our community, because we also live here, we're residents here, we pay taxes here, and we care deeply about our community. And I think this is one of those situations where I think we need to be more proactive on the front end to make sure that our legislators and our governor are aware of the situations that they have created out here in rural Colorado, where it's, you know, we really need funding to extend more. So I just wanted to make sure I shared that. Thanks, everyone.
And just to follow on with that as well, recently there's been media coverage that the legislative and the executive branch in Colorado have stated a goal of, during this legislation session, they want to be able to fully fund schools for the first time in 14 years. And I think that that's important context for those of us in the Roaring Fork Valley, and as Director Ramirez said, the rural school districts. It's been at least 14 years since it was fully funded, and that's fully funded with our state's unique approach to funding public schools. So even within that unique approach, it hasn't, those benchmarks have not been met in over a decade. And so our schools have been locally filling in for those essential services that otherwise would have perhaps come from state support. So again, I appreciate Director Ramirez pointing out the value of advocating for our school district, for our students, for our teachers at the state level. And I think that there are going to be opportunities for all of us to do that in the upcoming legislative session, which starts in a few days.
I would just like to reiterate the fact that property taxes increasing does not give us extra money as a district. That because of the backfill of the state legislature, they're just giving us less money because they don't have to supply as much, but it is not giving us more money as a district. And I just think that's really important for us to keep in the forefront, that those increased tax rates isn't getting us more money as a district in that sense. And so I think that's important to share.
Yeah, and I agree with the comments so far. And for anyone listening who's confused by the school finance formula, as I have been, as I've learned, there's a great article in the Colorado Sun from a couple of years ago. If you Google, I think it's Amendment 23 and budget stabilization, you'll begin to understand the situation that we are in today, and why it's important to take this to make a consequential decision here for schools.
Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, can we please call a vote?
Director Tyler,
Aye.
Director After,
Aye.
Director DeFreitas,
Aye.
Director Kuhlenberg,
Aye.
Director Ramirez.
Hi.
Directors, you've just approved the mill levy certification resolution. We have no other business on the agenda at this time. So if there is no objection, this meeting will be adjourned. It is 4:32 p.m. Thank you,
Thank you all.
everyone.